Hi, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about what a US economy collapse would look like for us. Now, most people think economy collapse, fear-mongering, oh no, here we go, but let's break down what could actually happen. Many think that if there was a collapse in the US, that it would be instantaneously and everything would dwindle, but actually, not many people understand an economical collapse means a slow start. It's a slow start. It's not chaos overnight. What happens is what we're currently seeing right now. We see our stock market being affected. There was a crash. It was a flux. Everyone came after me saying, it's a flux, it's a flux. I bought during the low peaks so that I have more later. Well, now we're right back to where it originally crashed to. So we need to have some ideal items prepped and put away because currently there is a tariff war going on. There is a lot of fluctuation between all of these different government sources out there. So we're going to just talk about the things that you could prep for before it becomes too late. Now, this is a topic that is very important to my family. My family believed very much that there could be an economy collapse. And we talked about things to watch for as I was being raised, because not only did my grandparents see the Great Depression and they watched the rich jump from buildings, lose everything, but it was the poor who survived. So right now we can take those moments from our history and start preparing for something bigger right now. Now, the thing to understand is everyone thinks, well, Wall Street's fine, or there's a fluctuation, this is the time to buy. Less than 8% of people actually invest money into the stock market. The stock market is not really meant for the average person, except for when we're talking about 401ks and just different investments for retirement. What happens when there is a massive shift in the economy and a massive shift in the market is when investors start to become aware. They start to become more timid. They start to retract. And this is something that my grandpa would talk about, is those investors would start to pull back. And when those pullbacks happen, that's when people's jobs start to get affected. And when a job is affected, no job equals no money. It is very simple when we talk about the US economy, along with many other economies. If there is no jobs, there is no money. And that ultimately will shift your supply chain very, very quickly. So the cracks in the market will start to progress. And as we see cracks in a market, you'll start noticing that there could be, I'm not saying it's going to be, but this is something that we need to be aware of when anybody is on the internet talking about that there could be a potential collapse, is understanding all the sides of a collapse that would be affected. So massive layoffs, especially in retail, tech, service industries, inflation skyrocketing. We have seen this for years now. Inflation keeps going up, and the curve can only go up so long before it collapses. You cannot keep going up. It's not an infinite mark. So we are almost to the same mark we saw when the tariff wars started. We talked about it. We talked about that there was over $4 trillion poured into a stock market. And it almost was like a falsified inflation, inflating this market to believe nothing's going on, nothing to see here. Well, it's starting to show that things could be at an offset. This could be something that we have been preparing for many years of what could happen. In 2008, when there was the huge fluctuation in the market, a lot of people said, no, it's just the market's going in flux. You should invest more. It's going to be fine. And then about 2 weeks later, we saw another downward pour of a crash. I'm not saying that a crash is happening. I'm saying a crash could happen. And that is something that almost every single prepper out there should be preparing for, is what if there was an economy crash? What does that mean? So you already have inflation. That one's already checked off. Wages staying flat. It seems like right now that they're trying to increase wages, but with that also comes inflation. You can't just increase a wage and then magically it's going to fix all the problems. That is trying to believe in a Santa Claus in that moment. Something is bigger there and it's going to make it all better. Our system has been broken for decades, and so it's going to take a lot more than just saying, hey, we might increase wages here, or hey, we might send a check there. So understand that this market is in a fluctuation right now, which means it could fluctuate into something much worse, or it could go into something better, but we still need to be as prepared as possible. This will ultimately cause more people to be living tightly from paycheck to paycheck with a lot less money to be able to be spent in other areas. So as preppers, we already try to set stuff aside so that we feel more prepared than ever. Credit markets are going to start to tighten. You're going to see less loans being put out. We've already seen that. The housing market, a lot of people don't understand what goes on with the housing market. They think the prices and the inflation, and then you got your interest rates and everything is going to be okay. No, it's becoming a very competitive market. People are taking out loans on homes that they cannot afford. And when there's homes you cannot afford and you're taking out a much larger loan, it sets yourself up for unrealistic expectations if, say, your job was affected. Once again, when the stock market and Wall Street get a little bit spooked, investors and corporations start to tighten in. It's just a natural phenomenon. Just like if you were to retire today and you saw a shift, for all of those who are retired out there, make sure you drop in the comments, you notice if there is a shift or price inflations. You're living on a set budget and you notice something change and you're going to start to tighten back a little bit. And yes, I talk with my hands, so some people get really upset with that, but this is the best way that I communicate. So I hope that if it doesn't bother you, if it bothers you, my bad. But you'll notice people like tighten in. I do that same thing right now. I live very strict on a budget, and if I notice an inflation or costs changing, I'm going to retract in a little bit more because I know that there is a chance that those prices are going to potentially increase or decrease. So let's talk about what an economical collapse could potentially look like for anybody. So the system is now being strained. It's being strained and choked so hard that you're going to notice if this was to truly happen, banks would start to freeze, transferring of money, ATMs with limited use, stock market drops, which would trigger a panic, which we've seen already in this month. We've already seen a panic ensue. And now we're watching those markets. Everyone said, nope, nothing happened. Everything's okay. And the markets got a little bit more intense today. And yesterday also. I watch everything and I'm just kind of taking an eye, watching which companies are affected, ultimately what areas could have potential risks of job loss or them increasing prices, investments just getting a little bit more fragile. Let's say that there was a true U.S. economy collapse. The government would scramble with stimulus or price controls, rations, you name it. They would try to do anything to kind of derail the idea of an economy collapse. Throughout time, we know economies have collapsed all over the world. They even collapsed during the Great Depression. We've seen things such as in World War II. This is one of the things that my grandparents very much preached into me was, do not trust Wall Street. That is something my grandpa said. He said, do not trust Wall Street. Do not trust it. Do not put all your eggs into one basket. And that was something he said. He said the rich were the ones who jumped from the buildings. He remembers it. His family, my great-grandparents talked about it. People jumping from buildings because of what happened in the economy. So there would be this tightening, choking effect that could occur if the US economy could collapse. Then there would be riots, protests, public unrest, petty crimes would turn into major crimes because once again, when that belt loop up above starts to tighten, the belt below tightens even quicker, because not everybody has all this money in savings, and that they're prepared that if there is a collapse and they needed, 10 years to regain control after a collapse, that everything would turn out all right. This is something we have to keep in mind when we talk about US collapses. Most people think it's a figment of imagination, that it could never happen, but we have seen time and time again, things happen all the time. And watching this play out slowly and just observing what could happen and what would be the next escalation, most of the time when the economy starts to collapse, for the US government at least, that is when we go to war. War makes money. And I know not everyone will agree with that, but it's true. War makes money. With a US collapse, the things that we would see that get impacted daily: food shortages, supply chain disruptions. We saw that with the pandemic. We saw when people were no longer allowed to go into work, our supply chain, people panicked, they rushed in, you had your panic buyers, everyone was trying to get that last little gain before something got worse. When we're watching this all in slow motion, you have time to prepare. You have time not to worry about the supply chain being disrupted. Don't wait to be that person who's like, oh, something is actually happening right now. We're watching those fluctuations. We are always observing. We may not always agree, but we all kind of prepare in the same areas and more extravagant areas. And that is the purpose of being prepared. So right now, when we're watching, you got your Dow, you got your S&P, everything is now going back to where everybody was freaking out because things were crashing. But remember, it was just in flux, right? Buy low and everything's all right. I'm not giving you financial advice. That is not my job. What I'm saying is, while people start to say, ooh, the market's fluctuating, this is where you take these key moments and you say, I'm going to work on my food storage. I'm going to work on my garden. I'm going to work on my fuel storage, because gas prices could ultimately end up spiking. I want to make sure that my water is up to date. I want to make sure that my water storage has been re-cleaned out and restored. For me, making sure my rain barrels are cleaned out. This is spring. We want to be really in depth with what's going on, but we also want to be watching every available information that we have out there. That's what makes us different. Medical supplies. This one right now, we know for a fact that this will be affected. There is not one person out there that cannot argue with the tariff war right now will not increase pharmaceuticals. It will. It ultimately will. When you have these tariffs in place, most of your pharmaceuticals are imported. 90% of them are imported. I believe almost 86% are imported from China. Your antibiotics, your cost of antibiotics. This could create a supply chain issue where we could see pharmacies running out of antibiotics. This is why I was working so hard this week with Jase Medical doing a treasure hunt here in the state of Utah. We finally had a winner on Sunday morning. We had a winner come through. They figured out all the clues and they won themselves a free Jase Go case, and they won some freeze-dried food. This is the time where we want to be working on our antibiotics, our medical prescriptions, making sure that we don't have any holes in our preps. When we're watching market shift and economies shift, we want to make sure that we are way prepared for this. The tariff war is not going away anytime soon, and I don't want to see you guys suffer from pharmaceutical tariff prices. Now, if the economy was to full on collapse, we would see crime increase as desperation grows. It would not be sudden chaos overnight. We're watching it play out in slow motion. Most economy collapses are a slow motion, and then the moment that that full collapse hits and it is announced newswide, we are too late. So we are watching all of these things happen, and it doesn't mean that we're potentially going into a US collapse, but we need to understand all the avenues and all the dimensions of what a collapse could cause and what it could impact on your daily life, weekly life, and monthly life if that was the full case. Now, even if it's not a full-on collapse, partial collapses, just a wall falling down in the system could impact you every single day until that system is rebuilt. So making sure you are fully prepared for everything that could happen. Long-term effects on the system if there was a US collapse. Bartering would return into local communities. I've already noticed that in my community, that bartering is becoming more frequent than ever before. Now, with my grandparents, we bartered with all of our neighbors on a regular basis. That was just part of our family. That was just part of the way I was raised. But now I have friends that are like, hey, I made sourdough. Would you like some sourdough? And I'm like, I have eggs. Would you like to swap? As we see these prices increase, you're not going to want to be out spending money, buying fast food, those quick fixes. You're going to want to really focus in on your preparations. So we know for a fact that currently right now in our economy that the price of solar inverters is going to increase. Solar panels are going to increase. Pharmaceuticals are going to increase. So you're going to want to knuckle down and get those ones done. I've been preaching about it for about 2 weeks now, and I want to make sure that you guys understand that with these tariff wars, we're going to start seeing prices increase. And the way to avoid that is just to take advantage of it now and stop putting it on the back burner. Now, understanding bartering and in your local communities, how many of you guys in here actually do barter with family, friends? We have, an overabundance of eggs, so we're constantly trading eggs. I teach throughout the entire year. I'll help people learn how to can in our community and making sure, just actually 4 days ago, I was helping a neighbor out fixing their freeze dryer, making sure that they had the right settings on it. So just having a good bartering community is very important, especially if there was a collapse. You kind of already have those allies in place because that is when crime could potentially increase. Cash could become ultimately worthless. I honestly think cash is dwindling very, very quickly. Unfortunately, that is just where we are in society is cash is becoming a digital currency, and it's almost a figment of our imagination. It's just a number on a screen. You open up your phone, your bank alerts you and says, oh, you have this much, but people are less likely to be carrying cash. So I make it important for my family to carry cash all the time, but also making sure to have those bartering items, whether it is goods, resources, alcohol, those little vices everyone has, nicotine, alcohol, all of those things, making sure to always have those stocked up would definitely potentially help you during a collapse. With where our society is going right now, I don't see it becoming a situation of an apocalyptic kind of situation. I could see us where people have become so dependent on debt, so dependent on their credit cards and this fictitious money that it would become a Great Depression in modern tech. And that could disrupt a lot of people's lives because not everyone has the money out there where you can make good, frugal finds in your prepping that could potentially help. So right now, with the way that the markets fluctuate, that would be having extra rice, having extra beans, having extra flour, staying away from that instant gratification, whether you are driving around and you've been busy all day and you want to hit fast food. No, go home and cook. Go home and cook something because that money could be allocated to something that potentially could help you in the long run if there was a collapse. You're going to want to have a strategy. You're going to want to focus on those essentials: food, water, hygiene, medical. We know medical will be affected with the tariff wars. So it's not this fictitious prepping. Oh, she's saying medical again. No, it's going to be affected. And now is your time to take control of it. I have Jase linked down below. That is who I use. That is the reason I did that treasure hunt, is I wanted to help lift the burden of having medical preps off of somebody's shoulders. So I spent the entire last week just hiking and hiding this treasure and making sure somebody found it. But Jase Medical is extremely affordable and you can go into it. That without having those price increases. They have not increased their prices since the tariff war, but I do know that that is going to happen very soon. Let's talk about diversifying income or skills, side hustles, trade hustles, community values. You're going to want to have your side hustles. If you have a market that's in flux right now where things could shift dramatically, things could be affected. And so making sure that you are, exploring different options, whether it is bartering, having a side hustle. For instance, for me, it's, I'm always selling some eggs off the side. So you can have different skills that could be potentially helpful, or just focusing on skills that don't cost you any money to focus on. So reading, learning, practicing. You can tie knots. You can work on fire starting. There are so many skills out there that you don't have to go pay to work on. You can just naturally work on those and build that up. Reducing your debt. We talked about this last week. This is really important. When you see a fluctuation in the US economy, or in any economy, because I know a lot of you guys are from all different sides of the world, but when you see a fluctuation where the markets could be affected, which potentially could affect your jobs and your income, you're going to want to reduce debt very, very fast. Like I said, many people are focused currently right now with the way that inflation has been on living on debt. I know I've taken a poll and I found that a lot of people use credit cards to pay for their groceries. No, go in with cash, give yourself a budget, set yourself achievable standards, especially with prepping. Like, oh, this week I'm going to focus on adding more potatoes into my preps because potatoes are filling, they're great nutrition, and they're very, very cheap, rather than getting something that is pre-made and that would quickly cost 3 times the amount of money for me to make it at home myself. Learn to live simple. That is your next one. Simplify now before you are forced to. Like I said in previous videos, start cutting out those subscriptions. Let's get to practicality, because if there was a collapse, you wouldn't want money going towards something that was invisible. You'd want it going towards something that is feasible, because ultimately, if the system was to truly collapse, there would be nothing left to lean on. So when you know that there would be nothing left to lean on, you would have to look at to simplify now rather than later. If you're simplifying later as there is a potential collapse that could occur, you're too late. You haven't focused in where you can focus now. And that is the part of me that's very frugal, where I'm like, you can make adjustments into costs so that prepping becomes more financially easier for you to do. Build local relationships in a collapse. I would not look at building relationships during a collapse. You know why? The reason is I already have those things aligned prior to a collapse. So whether it is a family member or, a colleague where you just know that you can rely on each other, there is that trust. Now make sure that it's not a snake in the grass, but there is that trust system that is built there. You can use that for your benefit. Oh, let's go in on buying bulk on rice. They throw in $7, you throw in $7, you both end up with about, 25 pounds, so 12 pounds of rice. That is a steal right there. You could learn to preserve that, splitting some of those bulk costs if you can't afford the cost. There are so many ways that you can start building relationships before a collapse happened, so that you are not in a fragile state if a collapse did occur, where you could get swindled or taken advantage, those kind of things. You want to have your relationships built up prior to something happening, such as SHTF or the end. I like to throw those words out there because most people will go to that system. But if there was an economy collapse, that is truly an SHTF system. An economic collapse might not look like Hollywood, but it would hit hard and it would hit fast, and not many people would be fully ready to accept what could potentially happen as we see a fluctuation in these markets, tariff wars, conflicts overseas. When you're seeing all of these things play out actively, you have to take a look around and say, okay, what can I control in this situation? Where can I prep? And what am I going to be doing that would be more beneficial for me or my family? What would you do if the banks closed tomorrow and there was a full economy collapse? I am not saying that would happen, but make sure you drop a comment down below of what you have done to prepare for situations when the economy is in a fluctuated state and you also have a tariff war going on at the same time and conflicts overseas. I want to hear what you guys are doing to prep for those situations. Now, make sure that you subscribe to this video if you haven't already. We will have videos almost every single day now that we are not doing the treasure hunt. But as always, stay aware, stay prepared, and always have your head on a swivel.